There's a road I'd like to tell you about. Lives in my hometown. Lakeshore Drive, the road is called, and it'll take you up or down. From rats on up to riches, 15 minutes you can fly. Pretty blue lights along the way, help you right on by.
And here we go with another riveting edition of Politely Intoxicated, and a jam-packed show for everybody here today. And first and foremost, because I don't want to keep anybody in suspense anymore, I have to introduce our special guest for today's show, and I'm as excited about it as you are, probably even more. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my good friend, Mr. Brady Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. It has been a pleasure to have known you for so many years, because I was just thinking about this today. Approximately 2001, you and I were, at this time of the year, it would have been the Gibson City general election. You and I were sitting across from each other in the interview room of WGCY in downtown Gibson City.
Yeah, that's right. You know, I do remember that now. When for those of you that may not know, Brady and I actually are we are from the same small town, Gibson City. WGCY was the first radio station that I ever worked at. And 2001 was that the what year did you win the first general election that you were in? Well, actually, it would have been your were you an alderman before you were
I was 1999. I graduated in January and ran for city council in Ward 4. Was alderman for 2 years, and then ran for mayor in 2001. So 6 years of political greatness under my belt.
That's right. Yeah. So you were 18, freshly 18, when you won the city council race.
Right. That's correct.
So and was it and 2001 was when you won the mayor race? Because now just like Celine Dion, it's all coming back to me now.
It's exactly. We both slept since then, put it that way.
That's right. So some of those night sleeps were harder than others, but I'm elated to have you on here today. And you know, for people that might not be aware of what you do now, and frankly, I have a general idea of what you do, but I'm not near intelligent enough to fully understand it. So what are you doing with your life now, Brady?
Well, I'm aside from being a vagabond and living from hotel room to hotel room, the travels are great. But really for the last 15 to 17 years, been in the rail industry. Worked directly for the railroads for 15 years, and then the last couple of years have been doing project management. Went in the contract world and basically oversee new construction, rehab projects, putting in ties, rail, new sidings, new main line at some points, new turnouts, that sort of thing. So engineering background, and currently sitting in the wonderful state of Florida, working on a project down there for the next couple months. So definitely has taken some interesting turns, and can say I love every minute of it.
So are you in Florida right now?
I am in the as I said before. I know we can't see the backdrop, but I have the curtains of shame and broken promises and misaligned names.
Well,
so that backdrop, curtains of the Holiday Inn.
That's right. Well, let me tell you what. I take it you don't have your Holiday Inn does not feature its very own holodome.
No. I'm not inside the holodome. They've changed. That's a chain that's changed their branding significantly in the last 20 years. So I've gotten to know them quite well.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because people will ask me all the time. They'll say, "Are you the mayor of Gibson City?" And I'll say, "No, actually, I'm not. But I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night."
Exactly. They don't often leave the light on for me, but that's another chain. So.
Right. Wonder whatever happened to Tom Bodette.
He's one of those mini marvels that I'd love to shake that guy's hand sometime, just by having surely just sheer fame from his voice.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody that is a spokesperson for Motel 6, I might be a bit hesitant to shake their hand because you don't know what you're coming back with.
You don't have a black light handy, but it's not to be confused with the career success of Gilbert Gottfried voicing the Aflac doc. So don't get those two.
Right.
We do have to watch out for fame.
Well, let's go ahead. Let's dive right in here to the to all the political madness that's going on right now. And you and I had a lengthy phone conversation last week, and we got to kind of catch up and and solve all the world's problems. In the time that we were on the phone. But I'll tell you what, the thing that has got me really enamored this week is this whole wiretapping calamity with the Trump transition team, and more specifically, the President Barack Obama's national security team, and even more specifically, Susan Rice, who we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and play that clip of her. This is her March 22nd. She does an interview with PBS in which she just can't seem to recall what Devin Nunes is talking about when he has that big press conference where he decides to go out and just throw up to the world exactly what he feels like he's got in his back pocket. And then after he does that, she says, "Oh, I don't know what he's talking about," and then more details get released on it, and it was like, "Oh, that thing! Now, why didn't you say so?" So let's go ahead and watch Suddenly Susan here just kind of vomit all over herself for just a minute.
Surprised to see reports from Chairman Nunes on that count today. I really don't know to what Chairman Nunes was referring. But he said that whatever he was referring to was a legal, lawful surveillance, and that it was potentially incidental collection on American citizens. There were occasions when I would receive a report in which a U.S. person was referred to, name not provided, just U.S. person. And sometimes in that context, in order to understand the importance of the report and assess its significance, it was necessary to find out or request the information as to who that U.S. official was. This is not anything political has been alleged. The allegation is that somehow Obama administration officials utilized intelligence for political purposes. That's absolutely false.
On that second go around, Brady, when she's talking about when she basically gets caught with her hand in the cookie jar, it is exactly like that. I have a 9-year-old that whenever I walk into the kitchen and I see just cookie crumbs strewn about the entire floor, and I say to him, what's going on here with the cookies? I don't know. I don't have any cookies over here. What's going on? And because she seemed so rehearsed in that March 22nd PBS interview, and then after it was divulged that there was a couple sources, I think Adam Housley of Fox News and the New York Times then reported subsequently that they had a source that said, no, Susan Rice was the originator of all this stuff. Now, whether, that's sourced, it is sourced reporting, but anonymous sources at that. Maybe that's not entirely correct, but generally with these people, when there's smoke, there's probably some fire not far behind. I'm curious to see, what your take on Suddenly Susan is.
you bring up an awesome point. I mean, this is you hit the nail on the head when we talked last week, and one of the things that was brought up in our conversation. This is a great demonstration is transparency. I'm simply floored, and I with all of the modern marvels of technology that we have, and similar to our interview where we're able to live stream and talk back and forth 1,000 miles away from each other in nanoseconds. Apparently these folks, you still haven't realized that the truth will come out, and transparency is a word that's been so misused. And I won't, as we talked, I won't hold back with George Bush. I mean, he was not the most transparent president, and claimed to be, and certainly the Obama administration. We've taken this we've taken the terminology to a new level. Jeff Sessions is going to have a lot to sort out with Ms. Rice. I mean, it's going to be a long, another long, arduous road to hoe, per se, and I think that Sessions is a very obviously he's an intelligent man, but I think that there will be very pointed and calculated procedures in the next few days to take these leaks, take this evidence, and we're in a pivotal time with all the accusations with Donald's tweets and President Trump's tweets in the last few weeks. This is a very pivotal time to bring some truth and light back to that presidency. So I think Sessions will do his best to take this information and calculate exactly what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, and I really think this is just the tip of the iceberg of a lot of things that are going to come out. The last 2 years, we really saw a tremendous amount of the Bush era policies come to light. Whether or not former President Obama had anything to do with that, I mean, I have my own druthers. I believe he did, but this is the term transparency has been synonymous now with what can we do to cover our own tracks and to draw attention away from us and use that as a distraction. So very unfortunate in the age and times of all of the technology that we have to think that such a simple puppet show will distract those of us who actually do pay attention.
Yeah, it is funny. Whenever I hear somebody start throwing around the word transparency, I am immediately I'm conditioned now to know that whatever follows the word transparency is likely going to be bullshit. It's going to be anything. It's going to be anything but transparency. And that's the thing. It's there's so many different buzzwords now in Washington, and I think you just probably hit the biggest one on the head. Transparency is something that just seems to be beat to death, and while it's beat to death, nobody really, I did this thing. I don't know if you saw it. It was an excerpt from last week's show where I talked about how I just think that political parties is just bad for this country, and I realize that at this juncture, if it ever goes away, it's many, many, many years away. But people are just so dug in, and everybody wants to tell their side of the story that offers the most expedience to whatever point of view it is that they're trying to get across. It's like with this whole wiretapping story. And the thing about with Susan Rice here, and like you and I were talking about off air, I said it's just the arrogance of these people. It's like, did they not think that any of us have cable? Like we're not going to see the March 22nd interview, and then the in the interview a week later with Andrea Mitchell on MSNBC. And despite Andrea Mitchell's best efforts to throw her softballs, she still screwed the pooch. She was still just like, and which is hilarious to me. But the fact of the matter is, it could have been any member of the Republican Party or a member of the Republican administration up there. She just happens to be the sucker of the week. That's up there. But But I digress. The wiretapping issue, there's two things in play. One of which is the surveillance issue in and of itself, which says, which to be fair, we do know just by by proxy of the of having the information that we do about Mike Flynn, that happened. And on the other piece of it is well, what was the correspondence between the Trump transition team and Russian officials? Which there's a whole lot of. It seems to be, look over here, look over here, look at that. There's nothing that's really come to fruition too much of that yet. But depending on which side of the aisle you are, only one of those issues matters. It doesn't, it's watch this hand. No, watch this hand. And it's just a whole bunch of sleight of hand. And it's everybody's just trying to muddy the issues so that everybody's confused. And job well done, because I think everybody is.
Well, Justin, it goes back to your analogy about the cookie jar, and we've really created a society, and I'm glad you're, to segue into the political party issue. I'm chomping at the bit, and I have my talons out on this one, but on the cookie jar analogy, and I really want to hit home with this is, we have a society now that we have taken because of the transparency definition. It no longer matters that you stole the cookie. It's now the question is, well, what kind of cookies were they? And our society has well, they were chocolate chip. Oh, well, there's more chocolate chips where those came from. Now, if they were oatmeal raisin cookies, that would be an obvious that'd be an obvious party foul, and we would have to prosecute for that. So, right. You're exactly right. Eye of the beholder. We have taken these issues. This is tip of the iceberg where we want to blaze trails in our discussion, but we've taken these issues and we have really dumbed them down to the point where it's whatever happened to when right was right, wrong was wrong, just keep your hand out of the cookie jar kind of thing. Now it's okay to do that, and we could get into the whole budget issues with the state of Illinois and the things that I've seen from the outside looking in for the last 15 years there, and really goes back before. It goes back 100 years in the state of Illinois for that matter. But, we need to regain our focus. And you're exactly right. With the wiretap situation, there's, there are federal crimes that have been committed. And you're right, depending on which side of the aisle you're on, it's which one matters most. And in my opinion, a crime is a crime. Let's go after both sides of this.
Yeah, and you know what? I have to say, in all the episodes that I've done here, I have managed somehow, despite living in the Peoria area, to skirt talking about the state of Illinois. And the reason,
My apologies.
the reason is because I can find comedy and I can find humor in in the federal government, even though the hypocrisy of it all is maddening. I can see hilarity in it. The state of Illinois genuinely pisses me off. It's just and it just I just get so fired up about all these people.
Justin, when
go ahead.
I think back to a situation where. And I can't remember. I believe it was a budget vote that was going to take place back in about 2008, and there was a group of representatives or senators or representatives from the House, and anyway they had fled the state of Illinois, and they had gone to and holed up in the Capitol in Indianapolis, and it made obviously made national news. They would they couldn't find these people to take a vote. And so I'll never forget, love him, hate him. Mitch Daniels was, and to further this, I've been an Indiana resident now for the last 11 years, and Mitch Daniels was the governor at the time, and Mitch did a lot of interesting things, and he really set Vice President Pence up for a pretty good economic. That stable. We had our employment rate was great. But I'll never forget Mitch Daniels' comment. He said, "Living next door to Illinois is like living next door to The Simpsons." And he said this on national television. And I mean, you can't help but just love that comment and say, "Yeah, you're right." So
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But and that
was,
how many governors do you think? Well, there's two. This George Ryan is still in prison, isn't he?
That's correct, George. Well, I hate to say this because I've lost contact with a lot of the folks that were surrounding themselves with George's camp. And the last I knew, I knew when George's wife passed away, they would not allow him to attend her funeral, which was really quite sad because I will say that George Ryan and his wife are lovely people. Contrary to the fact that that George committed a crime. That was not. I always say it's not my place to judge. That's somebody much higher than myself. But George. George served his time, or is serving his time. We've got Governor Rod that's been in prison now for quite some time, and I believe 2 or 3 other governors previous of those two, with the exception of Governor Edgar, who is just a tremendously remarkable guy. I've had an opportunity to meet all 3 of those individuals, Edgar Ryan and Blagojevich, and I will say Governor Edgar and his wife Brenda are just remarkable people. They really are truly genuine, down to earth, solid earth folks.
When I was working for a radio station in Champaign, that was around the time that all the Blagojevich chaos was taking place, and I'm sure you know this. Jim Edgar and his wife lived in a subdivision just outside of Mahomet, which, if you're unfamiliar with Illinois geography, is probably maybe 10 miles from Champaign. And a gentleman that I worked with was actually his neighbor, and I remember him telling me that that he talked to him in his yard, and if it was up to him, Jim Edgar actually probably would have ran for governor again, but he said that he told him in jest that if he runs for governor again, that his wife would probably leave him, and I don't think he was totally kidding.
I remember meeting Brenda. Interesting side note on that. I met Brenda at a fundraiser, and I was probably 11 or 12 years old at the time, and was just simply fascinated by the fact that I'm sitting there, getting a hug from the wife of the governor, and she had one of her aides. I believe she had a couple administrative aides with her, and they had taken my picture. And back then, of course, no digital cameras. I see back then, like, my God, we're old, but no digital cameras, and I don't think it was the old, certainly wasn't one of the box cameras that Kodak made, but it was, high quality. And they said, well, let's get your address and we'll send you a picture. And 2 weeks later, I get this letter from the, governor's mansion in Springfield. And it's just very nice. I still have it to this day, picture of Brenda and I, and a handwritten letter that was signed by her, and just a lovely woman. So she did a lot, unbeknownst to her, to influence me and kind of inspire. So amazing, a side note, just what a simple act of kindness can do.
Yeah, and things like that. Like you said, you were 12 years old at the time. Gestures and things that. And you know what? I think the Edgars were probably cerebral to the fact that that even though I always got the impression that they were very down to earth and and really pretty humble people. I think they appreciated the profound impact that they could have on people's lives. Personally, certainly, of course, when you're governor of any state, you kind of have the ability to to pull some strings to have a lot of impact on a lot of different people's lives. But really, on a personal level, I thought that I agree with you. I thought they were and are tremendous people.
Absolutely.
But and Robert Blagojevich, I did meet him one time as well, and I don't want anybody to misunderstand here, because I'm not name dropping here, because if I went to go see Rod at his prison cell in Colorado, I think that he's at, I could walk past him and just pace back and forth for an hour straight, and he would never recognize me. So I don't want to make it sound like him and I were going to the same mixers, you know.
Well, it'd also be nice to not be associated with any government contract or anything of the like that he might correlate you with. But
right, I didn't have buy Senate seat money, so he didn't know didn't fully appreciate who I was.
I'll tell you that and I'm the same way, Justin. I didn't mean to name drop as if these were close, personal, near dear friends of mine. Just mention those folks as they were influential in my life, and I'll never forget the Rod Blagojevich story that I was privy to years ago. This actually had come off of WLS, the first part. Rod's father-in-law was Alderman Mell in the city of Chicago, and they had a mutual, obviously a relation around the Joliet area, and this relation had a contracting business of running dump trucks, and the city of Chicago had contracted 150 dump trucks to this contractor in the wintertime, in case big snow and we need dump trucks. The only problem was after many years of these contracts being let, somebody finally did some homework and found out that this contractor in Joliet had possession and ownership of 0 dump trucks. So they made a lot of money with zero inventory, 0 capital.
Well, you know what? I always say that. So they were like Uber before Uber was ever. Because Uber is a $50 billion company. At least they were before their stock took a dive. But they didn't own a single car. So they've got that in common.
Exactly. So if you I'm pretty sure they couldn't have they probably could have bought 1 million dump trucks after sitting on a pile of cash.
Right. Right. But so well, do you think in Illinois with Bruce Rauner as governor, and in fairness to Bruce Rauner, I think that guy is just got an impossible task ahead of him, because here's the thing about it is this we have gone down this cosmic money hole so far that I don't know how you really get back out of it, because he is being painted as being morose, greedy, pretty much like any Republican, does, gets painted, because when everybody stands up and says, well, we need to cut, and clearly the state of Illinois, statewide or nationwide economics at the foundation level is no different than anybody's household economics. Money in, money out equals money left. And the money in is egregiously less than the money out. So when people start screaming about cutting spending in Illinois, everyone's like, yeah, we got to cut spending, until they say, it's like, okay, we're going to go and cut over here and with program X, and they go, whoa, that's my program. Not so fast. It's like everybody's on board with cutting until it affects them. But the problem is that at some point, everything that they want to cut affects everybody, and then inherently nothing gets cut.
Oh, absolutely correct. I think from from the outside looking in perspective, you see things and you hear things of people's disdain for the state, and it's no secret. You read the blogs and the social media posts where people discuss leaving Illinois en masse or in the masses, and I want to be very clear when I say this, that I have nothing but love for my home and my hometown. I grew up, as we said, in Gibson City, and I wanted to make this a mention earlier. As following the last local election. I have nothing but great things to say, and I owe the folks there a tremendous amount of respect and still thanks to this day for, allowing me the opportunity to serve them. But, the things that we hear that go along with all these statements about leaving the state and what are we going to do? And there are so many layers to that onion when it comes to, well, what is causing these problems? And, people point at education and say, well, education is the largest single recipient. And that's actually that's not actually 100% true, but, does there need to be education reform? And the answer is yes. Does there need to be pension reform? And the answer is absolutely yes. The Illinois Department of Transportation, for example, not to pick on those folks, but they had some phenomenal pension plans, and they were not self-sustaining pension plans. And perhaps when the market and money market was a good investment, in this, you could play with the investments a little, more than you can today. It might have made sense to somebody like Bernie Madoff to have a pension plan in the state of Illinois, but those things are legitimate items that you're right. They affect real people. They affect real lives. They've already started to affect real people in their lives. But the fact of the matter is, someone, whether it be Bruce Rauner or the next, and this is where the term business person comes into play. I'll be very frank about it. We don't need career politicians. That term absolutely deplores me. It deplores me to hear. It makes me sick to my stomach when I hear someone say the term career politician, because this country, whether it be a church board, whether it be a town council, whether it be a county commissioners, whatever, was never designed to have people that were career politicians. There is a huge difference between serving consecutive terms and being a career politician. In other words, we've adopted this falsehood, this mindset that unless you have some political cloak that you wear, you're not going to be a good mayor, or you're not going to be a good state representative or a governor or whatnot. And the fact of the matter is, understanding policy, understanding your constituents, and getting to the root of problems, and tackling those problems is really what really what it takes. I mean, that's business basics 101. If you were to run the state like you would run a business, and this is where this is where you enter bureaucracy and you enter all the red tape and the hoops to jump through. It certainly isn't a dictatorship where Bruce Rauner or Donald Trump in the presidency seat, gets to make every decision. But there has to be a leader of the band. And anytime you think about, how do politics work? Well, you have to have that leader. You have to have that person that sets the precedent, sets the tone. Ultimately, they're not the decision maker. That's why you have separations of powers of government. So the executive branch is there to be the leader of the band, and the judicial branch that we've had so much conversation about lately. That's to keep the check and balance of the legislative branch. So, not to dumb down the conversation of politics 101, but to enter a business person to solve these problems, to identify these things that we need to correct so very badly. How do you run a household without a balanced budget? And that's all Bruce Rauner is trying to do. Whether it's a Mike Madigan issue, I do think there's some major problems there, and I think Mike's tenure is quite. But there. Some of the policies that the Madigan era put into place, and I don't think now is the time for that. I mean, there's some drastic decisions that have to be made. There are people that are going to be drastically affected, and those are hard decisions to make, Justin. I mean, as you know, the state has to run as a living, breathing, eating entity, and if you decide to overlook the fact that it is ultimately a business, we all lose. I'm the first guy that'll sit there and tell you that, emotions are a wonderful thing. We all should have emotion. But when you enter emotion into business decisions, into government decisions, and you make those decisions solely on emotion, we run into some serious problems. And a lot of those problems are exactly where we're at right now. So fact-based decisions, Bruce is up against the wall, and I think that as voters and taxpayers of Illinois, you guys just have to continue to demand that they stay the course.
And the thing about it is with and you really, I think you kind of touched on the what is, and maybe not specifically education in of itself, or like the IDOT folks. But I think the Achilles heel of the state of Illinois is pensions. And here's the thing that really kind of that bothers me. And when I talk about pensions or especially education, I want people to understand that when I'm talking about education, that is a separate issue and a separate entity in my mind than talking about specifically teachers, because it's a very personal issue to teachers. And I have several friends that are teachers, and it should be a personal issue to them, because the teachers that are phenomenal educators, that love what they do, they're out there busting their hump trying to make a difference in kids' lives every single day, and I don't want to take that away from them. But when you look at the overall financial state of Illinois, and with the pensions, I mean, it's when these whole programs were set in place, I don't think anybody at the time ever envisioned the day where there would be more people in the boat than there was rowing the boat. And so it brings us to where we're at today. And I have a real concern. Like I just think that people really believe, and even the lawmakers in Washington, and if they don't, or I'm sorry, in Springfield, and even if they don't, even if they don't believe it, they're out there, pretending like they do, is that the money will never run out. And as it relates to pensions and teachers' retirement and things like that, there's teachers that have been teaching for 15 years that have been planning on having their retirement and so on and so forth. I am not of the mindset that we should move the goal line on those people. I mean, this is what they signed up for. This is what they were told, and but I am concerned that something's going to have to give economically, and I think that if there isn't some sort of reform done swiftly, that people that are a couple of years from retirement are going to be left wondering what the hell they're going to do about their retirement.
No, you're exactly right when it comes to the teachers being a separate issue from education, because quite honestly, without, and I'll say this, to anyone that wants to know, without good quality teachers, without without quality in mind, and without that ideology, you have states out there that we have kids that can't read or write, and it's in every state, but you have that's one thing about it. When you fall to the bottom of the barrel, and you can no longer produce quality test scores, and you can't produce results, and you no longer have a workforce, because you're just not you're just milling out numbers of students, and there's no rhyme or reason, and there's no standards, if you will. And believe me, it does happen. So I have to say that there has to be a compromise there. I don't have the answer to what it is, but it certainly isn't. It isn't punish the teacher. I agree with you wholeheartedly. That's not the intent of this. But there are some administrators, there are some boards that need to pick up. And I'm telling you, as you said, there's not an endless amount of cash. As I've traveled myself throughout the country, I've certainly seen, from an educational standpoint, I've certainly seen states far worse than Illinois. I've seen locations that, city, Chicago, as we often talk about, or some of the other areas that always seem to make the radar. Illinois has maintained its own, but if you let education go, you've let your last bastion and hold on reality slip out the window. So I'm certainly not against that. But back to the original question. I mean, you've got real earth-shattering decisions that are going to affect people's stability, and it's going to affect people's lives. And we have to get a balanced budget in the state. You have to have that. There has to be a compromise at some point in time, because quite honestly, the path that you're on right now, you've got three, I believe Connecticut leads Illinois in the number of jobs, industries lost. And it all has to do, it goes back to the same thing, pensions and government regulation. So,
what would
I think
happen?
where I stand on that.
What would happen, you suppose? I mean, do you think because there was a part of me that thinks that overnight we would have a lot of problems solved is if there was, like, let's say there was a civil war in the state of Illinois, and the folks north of I-80 decided they wanted to break off, and everybody south of I-80 pretended like we wanted to stop them, but really we just wanted to make them feel like they were doing something, and they became their own republic north of I-80. And south of I-80, everything, everything just became, well, that's the new state of Illinois. How much do you think would be resolved if something like that were to happen? And realize we're talking about a crazy lunatic hypothetical here, but I'm just curious to see what you think.
Well, it's been Justin, that's been an ongoing statement that I've heard since I was, old enough to remember. Why don't we just sever off Chicago? And of course, more recently than past, has that become the mantra and the sentiment from a lot of downstate folks. And I can honestly say that I think, and having worked in Chicago and having some very good ties to the transportation industry in the Chicago area, I can say that without a doubt, there is a tremendous amount of give and take, and just separating in those terms would be a very bad thing, short term and long term for the state. I do believe, though, wholeheartedly that some reform needs to be put into place, because quite honestly, it is the Chicago machine. And Rahm Emanuel, he is more of a centrist than I thought he would be. There's still daily era policies in place, but certainly, I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but Emanuel has very, out of a lack of a better word, progressive ideas to situations. Certainly, that's not reflected with the crime rate. It's not reflected with, whatever statistic of the day that we want to, I don't want to touch on the Second Amendment, but from a surely an economic standpoint, with commerce, I'll tell you something about rail. Getting back to Chicago, 75 to 80% of your nation's goods shipped by rail, shipped by intermodal, go through Chicago. It is the most vital inland port that we have in the United States, and I know that sounds like a gross understatement, but oftentimes we look at it as more of a drag on our economy, and it's more of a hold us back type thing. There has to be some drastic reform there. It needs to be Rauner and Emanuel sit down at the same table. It needs to start today. Do I think it'll ever happen? I think it has to happen. It's not a matter of, do we think, is it a hypothetical? I think it absolutely has to happen. There has to become a consensus. There has to come a consensus at some point in time where Chicago is allowed to, continue its standalone policies, but also recognize that there has to be a contribution. And I don't blame Chicago for the lack of leadership in Springfield. I think that having Chicago, certainly with the Electoral College, we saw Chicago has an impact, and with several of our elected seats in the state house, Chicago definitely has an impact and a bearing. That's stating the obvious. But how can we benefit off of that? And how can downstate, how can the people south of I-80 use that to their advantage? And the answer, while it's not simple, it's simply that it's not simple, but it's such that we need to embrace on the commerce, the port activity, the belt lines, the railroads, the highway infrastructure, the ports that are there. How can you benefit downstate? And you're starting to, Justin, you're really starting to see that when you go to places like Joliet and you start going to places like Kankakee where that intermodal activity is starting to get farther outside of the city, and you're starting to have that kind of belt activity, uh, you know, like it or not, it's spreading out. So there's a lot of local benefit that can be had, but there's also a lot of the mindset that just simply we need to get rid of Chicago that you have to put aside to make those things work.
Yeah, and I obviously I think in aggregate it's a bad idea to say let's get rid of Chicago. I mean, it's a crazy idea anyway. It's something that that will never happen and probably should never happen. But I think that a lot of the it just seems like Chicago, like you say, is a tremendous asset, not just to the state, but really the entire country. When you talk about it being a hub and and a pass through for all sorts of different goods. But I think that the problem that it poses and what the real frustration is for people is that since it is a huge metropolitan area, there's so many varied interests and interested parties in a lot of different special interests. So inherently, getting things done in Springfield becomes a lot more complicated, just because the net of people is so wide, along with the different state programs that are important to them.
Yeah, special interest. I mean, without a doubt, there's literally thousands of special interest groups that are thriving in Cook County alone, and some tackle a secular single issue, and you'll never hear another peep out of those groups except for that one particular issue. Until you bring Chicago and the frustrations of downstate Illinois, if you will, to the same table, and it works both directions. You have to have the folks of Chicago and surrounding areas understand the plight of somebody in Marion, Illinois, or East St. Louis, or somebody that's in the rural areas around those towns. I mean, how does ADM in Decatur, they rely, while we think that they're relying solely on the farmer, they rely so much on the Board of Trade, and they rely so much on the ports and the influence and the effective velocity of rail traffic through Chicago that ADM, I would say that a company that is huge in Central Illinois, is hand in hand with agriculture and the city of Chicago itself. So we have to embrace a level common ground, and that's really what Rauner needs to be doing. I mean, I think the last several elections, last couple of elections that I remember watching the results on with the state, people are crying out, and it's very obvious what the dissension is. I was happened to be in Kansas in the last general election in November, and during the presidential election rather, and was looking at the red and blue of the state, and noticed where the cities were, and Wichita in particular, where I was sitting, and the areas surrounding Kansas City on the Kansas side, Topeka, for example, though in a very similar situation in a much less populated state, but we have this us and them attitude, and I can tell you that it's never that does not work, and it's getting increasingly worse. I think that would go a long way to solve some of the inner city problems that Chicago has right now, if they could embrace some of the principles that say the rural communities and the rural areas of Illinois have. So it really is while it's a very complex problem, I think there's some very simple solutions. Maybe I kind of retract my earlier statement.
Well, I think you said something that's pretty important there, and where you said that you need to get people to understand the plight of the people north of I-80 to understand the plight of somebody in Marion, Illinois. I think that it actually is probably got to go a step further than that, and it's not getting them just to understand it, but actually getting them to care about it, because I don't think people are going to sit around the table and have a real meaningful discussion and real meaningful negotiation until they really truly care. And likewise, somebody in Marion, Illinois, has to give a damn about what's happening in Chicago. But it's so, and that's the thing that's so interesting about the state of Illinois is that if you could live in Bourbonnais and and your life could be have light years of separation between somebody that lives 60 miles away in Chicago. So it's just that melting pot. It's just a very interesting dynamic, and I do not envy Bruce Rauner's position, having to try and navigate this whole scenario, because I just think it's kind of a not to be too much of a cynic, even though I am. It just seems like an unwinnable situation.
It seems. Well, it certainly is a scenario that just has gotten more and more escalated and more tense. Definitely over the last 5 years, if not 10-year time period. And, there's always been that dissension, but I think more so now as you have more desperation, you have more plight, you have more lost hope. And I don't want to say all the cliche things that came out of the presidential, the cliche terms that came out of the presidential race, but I do believe there's a feeling of hopelessness amongst certain sects of society. And how do we get to how do we reach those? How do we reach the microcosms of ideologies that exist all over, and how do you bring people to the same table? And again, I don't know that we've actually taken the time to identify what problems exist out there. You do have the dynamics of a state like Illinois. It parallels California for that standpoint of the agricultural and rural area to the metropolis of whether it be LA or Chicago.
Well, Brady, always appreciate your insight, and and this has been a lot of fun. Unfortunately, we're running short on time, and like I told you, before we went on the air, as I said, I think you and I could talk to the wrong number for a half an hour, but hopefully we solve the world's problems here, in the past 50 minutes or so.
Yes, I don't think the world's ever going to be the same. I'm just telling you that right now. I think the world has changed as of this evening.
And hopefully Bruce Rauner watches this webcast, and after he watches this webcast, he will realize that he has just wasted an hour of his life because we have done nothing but identify the problems that he already knows that he has and have solved absolutely none of them.
Or he could jump on the bandwagon to want to meet both of us because we have such a long.
Well, we can tell him
that we know. So
you know what, Bruce?
It could be advantageous.
We may not know how to solve any problems, but boy, do we know how to party. So get on our limo bus here. Let's have a good time.
Do you know where Kappa, Illinois is?
That's right. We'll put on a fake mustache and sunglasses, Bruce. It'll be fine.
Oh, it's good to hear your voice, man. I tell you this. You've done very well in your career, and it's all like you said. It is always a pleasure to talk. So I'm glad I could be a part of this.
Oh no, the pleasure is all mine, Brady. It's so glad to talk to you, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for for what you've done. For those people that aren't aware, Brady has been an entrepreneur since. God, how old were you when you started your lawn care business?
Let me back up a second there, Justin. Let me throw a shout out to one of my. You mentioned your father on the creation of your show, and I will tell you that I'm going to back all the way to my granddad starting out in business. I had a garden growing up on the farm, and I actually raised produce and came into town to the farmer's market, and I had an agreement with my granddad. He would buy the seeds for the vegetables fruit if I would pay him back, and it was a loan. It wasn't free money. And he said, as long as you pay me back, and he said, you're going to have to develop a business plan. And I think Justin, I was probably 8 or 9 years old. It's a true story. I went and sold the produce I grew downtown, and actually he owned the lot where the original farmers market was in Gibson City, and would go in there on Saturday mornings. I'd sell snap peas and beans and sweet corn and that sort of thing. Even some apples that we had from the trees out there in the farm. And I think my first year I made like $55 without, after I paid him back. So, 8, 9 years old, and shortly after, I came to town in 2001, or excuse me, 1991, off the farm. Started mowing yards and cleaning gutters and about anything I could do for to make a buck, and always enjoyed working, and can say to this day that work ethic and the fundamentals in life that my granddad instilled in me, it's paid dividends, and couldn't ask for a better role model. So thanks for the opportunity to plug him a little bit there, and I hope he's doing well wherever he is in the annals of time and heaven. So, thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Brady. It was really my pleasure. And you know what? I think we'll have to do this again sometime soon, and I truly mean that.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Justin.
Have a good evening and safe travels to you, Brady.
I understand. Thank you.